Welcome to the Create Your Happy podcast, where conscious female creators come together with a shared vision to inspire and empower women as they learn how to fully embrace their humanness, find their unique voice, and collaborate on how together we can change the world. I'm your host, Christy Holt, happiness coach and conscious funpreneur on a mission to change the world one beautiful soul at a time. All right, gorgeous, it's time to get curious and become inspired. It's time to create your happy. Welcome to the show, Laurie. I'm so excited. Today we have the beautiful life coach, Laurie, with us. And Laurie is an accredited EFT tapping practitioner and manifestation coach. I'm so excited to dive into both of these topics. She thrives off of empowering heart-centered entrepreneurs to overcome their imposter syndrome, another thing I can't wait to dive into today, so that they can manifest their dreams with ease, confidence, accuracy, and joy. Welcome to the show, Laurie. So glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to see you again because it's been a while.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this conversation. We got some juicy bits coming, but let's start this off with hearing a little bit about your story. I'd love to hear a little bit about your backstory and some of the things that you've overcome to get you to the place that you are today.
Yeah, well, thanks for asking, and I'm really grateful to be here and to share a bit about the backstory. So I'm originally from California, from the San Francisco Bay, and my father was a juvenile probation officer, my mother a Catholic school teacher, and I was raised in what I thought was a perfect house, if you will, and it wasn't. And of course, there was a lot of conditioning and programming of what would the neighbors think? Don't air our dirty laundry. And there was this kind of constant, persistent ick feeling in the house. And I'm the oldest. I have a younger sibling. And we were really raised with a dad who was filled with a lot of rage and presented one face, to the street and at the job and so on. But then in the house, it could be pretty terrifying, walking on eggshells a lot. And I think the great news around that piece of it, even though there was a lot of trauma, was that it really paved the road for me to be where I am today, to make the choices to enter into the coaching industry and to be an EFT practitioner. Maybe my life would have been different if I were not raised the way that I was raised.
No doubt about that.
Yeah. Right? Isn't it? Because, and I think that probably your listeners, maybe even yourself, I don't know, might have the same story of going to therapist after therapist after therapist and never really having sort of the obvious pointed out to me. Like I went to countless therapists and nobody ever used the word trauma. Nobody ever said, whoa, holy shit, it sounds like you were raised in a really tough background. What about this? What about your parents? Never. Because when I was going to the therapist, I was going for symptoms, right? I was going for a bad relationship, this boyfriend, this heartbreak. But of course, behind that was the way that I was trained and programmed and conditioned in my family environment around relationships, how my mom and dad related with each other, how they related with us and parented us. And so this is not to blame or shame them, of course not. But to me, that does feel like my biggest overcoming. I didn't know that I had PTSD. I mean, in fact, I didn't even know I had it until 2019 when I was officially diagnosed with it here in the Netherlands where I live now. And so the long and the short of it is I became a probation officer like my father did. He was training me since I was a little kid, talk about irony, to that, to kind of like check out people on the street and to size them up and then come back and give a description to him, like what color was their hair? Do they have a gap in their tooth? Were they really tall? And all of these things. And it really got me to pay attention to behavior. It got me to kind of figure out what makes people tick, what drives them. Are they telling the truth or not? Because my father was a consummate liar. He was constantly trying to deceive people, including me and my sister and my family. And so I started to take what he was teaching me and apply it even in my little life as a kid and a teenager and so on. And that took me into getting my bachelor's in anthropology and then a master's in criminology and then becoming a federal probation and parole officer, working primarily with sex cases like cyber sex cases. I had the first stalking caseload when the stalking law went into effect in California. And so when I got to work with these offenders one-on-one, I saw that change could happen. I saw transformation could happen and that there was a little bit of a formula behind it. They needed to leave their environments. They needed to leave the social contacts that they were constantly working with. They needed to be granted permission that they could have a different mindset. And they needed people to empower them and hold them accountable and believe in them. And I loved that. Hey, it's working. They are making changes. These people who thought that they could never change, the system told them they could never change. And then that's when I got a lucky break, if you want to call it that. And I opened up a magazine one day and I saw What is Life Coaching was the title of the article. And that was in 2002. And I was like, yeah, what is that? And then I went on to go to the programs that were listed at the back of this magazine and enroll in 2 of the coaching schools and became a coach and started my practice alongside of my full-time career. Yeah. And then later on kept training in other things. Like I became a Reiki master and EFT practitioner. And that's kind of the story. I guess I would say overcoming family trauma is one of the biggest. And then overcoming myself, Christy, because being trained by my mom and dad, they were really goal-oriented, but they were not visionary. My dad could be visionary, but when it came to my life, I wasn't allowed to be a visionary or I wasn't allowed to pursue my dreams. So then I overcame that family programming, family conditioning by finally one day turning that volume down and saying, no, we're going for it. Yeah. And obviously quitting my career, quitting my federal probation job and starting my practice. And this year is my 20th year in practice.
Amazing. And I love actually how, we have so many different experiences in the world that shape us. And nothing really ultimately is an accident because those skills that you learn from that, now you've taken those skills and you've transferred them, leveraged them into life coaching to use them for good, to make a great giant impact in not only in people's lives, but the ripple effect from there, simply because you started down this career path, and the things that you took from that are completely relevant into different areas. And I love how, sometimes we take a few different routes to get to the place we're going at the end of the day, but they're all ultimately contributing to that end goal at the end of the day. And when we look back, we can be like, wow, okay, well, that wasn't, maybe my ideal experience, but I've taken this thing from it, this learning, this growth, this experience, and I'm going to take that forward and shift it and use it for my ultimate vision. So I absolutely love that. So we've touched on a lot of things here. So let's first of all tackle what the fuck is EFT? Because I think probably there could be some people wondering, what is that? And I love EFT. I'm going to throw the floor to you, though, to share a little bit about that. This is your zone of expertise. Such a great tool. I can't wait for you to share. So.
Yeah, thank you. And by the way, feel free to cut me off because you know how I get geeked on EFT. So feel free, like Laurie, bottom line is sister. So EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques, and it was developed by an NLP master whose name is Gary Craig. And Gary Craig actually fell in love with another technique that was called thought field therapy. TFT, thought field therapy. And Dr. Roger Callahan created TFT. He himself was a clinical psychologist who had been working with a lot of people who were having phobias and extreme anxiety, and they were not moving past their phobias, no matter what he was doing. And so Dr. Roger Callahan was trying to find ways to perhaps get in touch with the body. Were there maybe even spiritual modalities that could help to get people to move past their phobias? And that way he could hopefully get this information to his clients and have a breakthrough. So Dr. Roger Callahan started to look at kinesiology, and he started to understand about meridians in the body. And we know that meridians go so far back as, 5,000 years with Chinese practices. And he started to talk one day with a client of his who he'd been working with for about 11 years. They say her name was Mary. And Mary had an extreme phobia of water. I mean, by the time Dr. Roger had been working with her, I think about 11 years. And they could only get her in like half an inch of water just to bathe. And so one day she called him, she said, oh my God, my phobia symptoms are through the roof and my stomach is nauseous. And with Dr. Roger Callahan's recent training back then with kinesiology, he told her to tap under the eye while talking to him, just about her experiences and what's bothering her. And the reason for that is because this point that we tap under the eye is related to the stomach meridian. Within just a few sentences, Mary said, oh my God, Dr. Roger Callahan, my symptoms are gone. I don't have this phobia anymore. Like, I feel cured. I don't know how to explain it to you. And she went over to his house where his practice was, and he had a swimming pool, and she started splashing water on her face. And he was blown away. Many, many years after that moment, she went on talk shows in the United States, said that the phobia never returned. So Dr. Callahan knew that he was onto something. And he decided that he wanted to use all of these tapping points while allowing people to freely talk. And what then would happen is the meridians in the body would get rebalanced, they would get recalibrated. And he discovered that the emotions, that is what was throwing the balance off of the meridians. So we then had this emotional, physical connection. And that is what he felt was the missing piece with people in his therapeutic practice. So Dr. Callahan created what he called algorithms back then, combinations, different ways to tap on your body, and basically the acupuncture points that acupuncturists use. But you get to tap on your face in these points, and then as you're talking, you will feel this emotional and physical release. And where Gary Craig comes into it, where he creates emotional freedom technique instead of thought field therapy, is he studied under Dr. Callahan, and he thought, this is very complicated and this is very confusing to have to memorize all these different ways to tap on your body. These different tapping combinations are not clear. So Gary was an engineer trained at Stanford. Even though he's an NLP master, he thought, well, is there a way with that engineering brain that he had that we can hit up all the meridian points in one basic tapping combination, which he calls the basic tapping recipe? And could we invite NLP in and use basically a tapping script so people don't have to just kind of riff and improv and know what to, figure out what to say? And so he combined NLP with TFT basically and created emotional freedom technique known as tapping. And with that one basic recipe, universalized, if you will, all those combinations and made it a lot easier. And what the benefits of EFT is you can get rid of phobias, you can clear a lot of stress and anxiety, you can overcome imposter syndromes, stop those limiting beliefs. And the beauty of EFT is, you know how you see in like a lot of positive thinking movements, they kind of want to bypass all the negative shit, right? They want to ignore it and forget about it and act like it doesn't exist, but that goes somewhere. It goes in the body.
Body holds it.
Body holds it and then keeps storing it. And then it gets worse and worse and worse. And then you get like pain or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So what ends up happening with EFT is you're using both sides of the brain and you're balancing both sides of the brain and you're addressing the problem. And usually we start with a setup statement that says, even though I've got this issue, I still love and accept myself. Or even though I've got this problem, that's okay. I'm human. I invite in the possibility of. So you're addressing the problem, but you're also bringing a solution in. And that's why it's so effective. It's beautiful because you can do it on yourself. You can have somebody else do it on you. You can do it from Zoom with me. It's so accessible.
I love doing the EFT when I'm in the shower because
I love it.
I don't know. I'm drawn to water. So I feel like that's like a really peaceful, comforting place for me, which feels very safe to really allow the things to flow. So that's where I like to do the EFT. It's like, I would think people think maybe it's a bit woo-woo, but it's really not. It's very scientific. And I think actually a lot of what people view as woo-woo or ultra spiritual and maybe view as contradictory to science is catching up, and the things are actually proving to be quite connected, very scientifically backed, even though it is traditionally some of these things perceived from a spiritual perspective. They're also science. So I think it's so interesting how neuroscience and quantum physics are like, the research is just continuing to show the scientific research backing up those once woo-woo kind of ideas.
I love that you share that, because one of the things, being an internationally accredited EFT practitioner, we have to go through a lot to get there. And one of the reasons for that is because EFTI, which is headquartered in London, is really, really big on basically quantifying EFT. And so there have been a lot of studies. In fact, there was a study with 272 veterans who had PTSD, and on average, most of them, between 5 to 7 sessions with a one-to-one practitioner, said all of their PTSD symptoms went away. And many of them had terror stories, like 100 episodes, like 100 real life episodes, when they were at war or were not. And they're like, I don't even have to go through the other 93. Okay, I address these kind of first 7 stories, and it feels like everything has become equalized, if you will, and I don't have that terror anymore. So there's also another doctor, Dr. David Feinstein, who happens to be married to Donna Eden, who's the creator of Eden Energy Medicine, if any of your listeners know about Donna Eden. And he is also a clinical psychologist who has been writing lots and lots of articles for journals on basically quantifying EFT and the power of EFT. So we're seeing tons of scientific studies around them. And also EFT being, many, many years ago, this was a mission of Gary Craig, the founder of EFT, the creator of EFT, to take it into hospitals and work with people with phobias. And there's a lot of doctors and nurses who are on board working with EFT, especially too around like cancer and physical symptoms around cancer, like nausea and so on, and just making a person comfortable. And that's what's beautiful about tapping. It can work for physical pain. It can work with mental and emotional issues. It really is kind of like the secret sauce of, of everything in so many ways. Yeah.
It can feel a little bit like magic, really. Like,
Yeah.
it seems like a bit of a shortcut. So,
Yeah.
I think maybe that's why it's not totally caught on everywhere. I know that it's growing in popularity, but I think that people tend to be skeptical of things, first of all, that they haven't personally experienced or whatnot, but also that it's kind of easy, really, and that you can do it yourself, and you don't need, you don't necessarily need a professional to go through the process with you all the time. It's good to have, that background and knowledge of how to do, but it's actually more simple than a lot of other strategies. So that's a bit of a shortcut in a way. So I would love for you to tell us a little bit more. Well, first of all, I'd be interested, what have you helped your clients overcome using this strategy? What are some of the examples of things that you have witnessed firsthand using this technique?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So primarily, I like to work with heart-centered entrepreneurs who are really struggling with overcoming themselves, overcoming their limiting beliefs. Most of them, the phrase that they always use with me is that they do have imposter syndrome. And so my first question is, which archetype are you when it comes to imposter syndrome? Because there are 5 archetypes, and oftentimes they don't know. So I have a quiz that I created that I put them through, and then we're able to use EFT and other techniques that I'm trained in combination with EFT to help them shift that so that they feel comfortable getting visible online, sharing their magic with the world, and living their big vision and big calling. The biggest things that I have used EFT with were actually sexual trauma. So I had one point in my career where I had a lot of women coming to me who were sharing with me that they were molested. Oftentimes they were molested by their own father or their own stepfather or uncle or cousin. And this is kind of crazy, amazing crazy, where in one session with EFT, this is how fast and how effective it works. They have the big, like a mountain that has been lifted off of their shoulders, and they're able to stop the self-blaming and the guilt and the shame that they put on themselves, even though they were a little child and it was obviously not their fault. But unfortunately, when they've been groomed by somebody who did this to them, they get that conditioning that it was their fault. And in one session, oftentimes that's really eradicated. The other things that often happen is if they do still continue to work with me past that one session, which oftentimes, of course, is the case, it is a need, they will have forgiveness for their offender. And that's not something I push on them. That's just a natural cognitive shift that they also have. I would never ever say you have to forgive this person. That's not obviously part of our training, but that is really miraculous and really extraordinary when that does happen. So those are the sort of heavy extreme cases dealing with the sexual trauma. But the other success stories that I've had have people who have had grief, like, lost a loved one, especially if it's been in something like a tragic event and it was really unexpected. In fact, I'm actually working with a client with that right now. And her beautiful transformation in actually I think we're on our third session. No, our second session has blown me away. She really came just kind of feeling like a shattered mess. She did not expect to see what she saw regarding her loved one's passing, and it was really traumatic. But the beautiful thing about EFT is I'm tapping with the client. So we see each other on Zoom and I'm tapping at the same time that they are, because even for me, like, to hear some of this stuff can really rattle me. But because I'm continuously tapping and balancing my meridians, I've got a strong foundation of support.
That energy.
Exactly. So that way I can hold the space and still be with them and not take on the trauma myself. Yeah. And that to me is another beautiful, extraordinary piece of EFT. But just in 2 sessions with this particular client of mine, I've been blown away by how she's not frenetic and crazy and frenzied over what happened, and was able to get to, in this second session, more of a place of peace. Yes. So people who are really in that extreme grieving place, sometimes they go numb and they don't feel the energy, they don't feel that vital life force anymore. The beauty with EFT is EFT practitioners keep getting you to feel the energy, notice the energy. How is it changing? So you become ultra aware of your body, and you're having a lot more somatic processing going on, which is the really healing part of it.
Yeah. I love that. And I just want to cycle back to the forgiveness and how crucial that is. Not about the other person at all. It is about your inner healing. So forgiveness, I think a lot of people really get hung up on, oh, I can't forgive. That was too large of a transgression. But by holding on to that, you are physically holding on to that pain, and in a way continuing to punish yourself and keep yourself stuck in that suffering as long as you continue to do so. And it's absolutely not about forgetting. It's absolutely not about, lack of boundaries or allowing similar situations to come up. Those are obviously very important factors in it. But I think a lot of people, and it may be maybe a churchy perspective on forgiveness and you must forgive and all of these things, that people get it a little bit twisted in their mind about what forgiveness actually means. And that is a releasing for you, for your wellness, for your growth. And I think that's amazing that these people are able to, come to that conclusion of releasing, because that is so empowering. And that allows them to move forward from that space of peace, love, joy, all those higher emotions that were previously being stuck and stuffed down by the weight of the hurt, the pain, the anger, whatever the emotions, sadness, it's all weighing, the guilt, the shame, all of it, just weighing them down. They can release that. Yeah. That is pretty life-changing stuff right there.
Yeah. And you kept using a really great word. You kept using space. So that's what's really beautiful and exciting with EFT is all that stagnation and all that stuckness of those denser emotions, those denser energetics that you were describing, like lack of forgiveness, anger, etc. It is in the body, and it is blocking up the meridians, the channels where our energy and our life force are flowing. And what ends up happening with that is there isn't the space. So this, you want to make a dream happen, you might not have the space or the energy, the life force to really bring that to. There is a process, though, and I can even share that on my own. I just discovered that my father passed away. I didn't know that he passed away. Nobody told me. I've been estranged from my family for 4 years, and I found out online. And I had for many, many years a right shoulder issue. By energetic standpoint, the right side is more the masculine side of the body, masculine energy, responsibility, outworldly influence. So I always really knew that this right shoulder stuff was associated with my dad. After he had passed away and I found out, I've been doing a lot of tapping with myself, tapping with a fellow practitioner that I do swaps with. And I had been tapping before on the shoulder, and it was getting a little bit better, but it wasn't fully annihilated. It wasn't gone. Yeah. And I'll tell you right now, I finally got to the place of full forgiveness, 100% forgiveness of my father. He was long gone now, but I noticed, oh my God, my shoulder has zero pain. And
That's
it was because I
amazing.
got to that place of forgiveness. I personally believe that the shoulder was freed up, that energetic finally released. But it is easier said than done. It does take lots of steps and lots of processes to get to that place of forgiveness. I think one of the challenges, we oftentimes want to rush people to get there. And that's what I like about EFTs. We never rush their process. It really is client led with loads of permission for you to just show up. We've got lots of F-bombing going on in
Yeah.
any sessions, lots of rage, because people feel safe, and it's a container where it's like, come as you are, bring all the energy. And when they're safe to share all that energy, blow that volcano out, if you will,
Yeah.
I see, that they come to this place of like serenity. But that could happen in one session, but sometimes we need to have multiple sessions to make sure that it's really, really cleared out, and to really produce that cognitive shift. And also to hit the core cause of the emotional
Yeah.
problem first started.
Sometimes that can be sort of buried a little bit, right?
Oh,
You're
yeah.
having a lot of surface symptoms, and so you're tackling that,
Yeah.
and it's an uncovering as you go, as you're releasing. Okay, well, there's still something here. What's the next layer? Okay, we're uncovering what's the next layer, and sort of digging within. And I think a lot of times it's uncomfortable. So
Yeah.
the natural tendency is to fucking
Yeah.
avoid it because
You nailed it.
it feels icky, it feels gross, it feels uncomfortable. And let's be real here. We are not taught very effectively in most cases how to process and hold our emotions. So we're, a large percentage of the population is really just not skilled at facing and feeling their emotions in a healthy manner. So instead of sitting with it and observing it, and again, it's also tied to sort of a consciousness perspective as well, because if you think you are your emotions, that can be terrifying as shit. When you have an emotion come up that feels contradictory to your identity or who you believe you are, and there is this inner conflict. And so instead of being like, well, isn't that interesting from an observer perspective? I'm seeing this emotion coming up. What might be the root of it? Instead, we go on this spiral and we have a whole shit ton of meaning attached to it. And we've got all these stories and we've got all these things, but we're not actually feeling it, right? We're blocking ourselves from feeling it. We're just going straight into story mode and catastrophizing and blowing it all up. And we're just not providing ourselves the space to sit and feel and process so that we can actually release that shit. So we end up stuffing it. We're like, let's just stuff this in the backpack, under the rug, wherever the fuck we can shove it, just so long as I don't have to feel it.
That's right, because the feelings can be scary, right? And then also, depending on how you were raised or what your society, culture, religion, family dictates, there may have been a lot of messaging around, hey, wipe that look off your face. I'm going to wipe it off for you. Or don't cry. Be a big boy. Put your big girl panties on. I mean, these were things I was told. Put your big girl panties on. Cowboy the fuck up. I was told those things. And so guess what you do? You do that, right? Because, oh my gosh, I don't want to get in trouble for feeling. I don't want to get in trouble for having my emotions. And that's what's so beautiful about emotional freedom techniques, EFT tapping, is you have all the freedom in the world to bring it to this place and to do it in a safe way. It's a very gentle process when you're tapping on yourself and you're saying, you're being guided by that practitioner. That practitioner is really with you. And we're also trained in certain ways, like if a trauma does come up, to create some psychological distancing so that way you don't go back into the trauma and re-traumatize yourself. We call it sneaking up on the trauma, I love this term. And then you're able to actually move through those hard feelings and hard experiences without having to re-feel them again, but clear them or heal them, feel and release, heal them. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. So we also talked about imposter syndrome getting in the way of your ability to maybe manifest all of the things that you want in your life. So that's two different sort of hot topics. So let's tackle imposter syndrome quickly first, or maybe not quickly, but let's go there first, and then we'll circle back and cover off manifesting and what that means and looks like as well. I know you're really passionate about helping people to overcome imposter syndrome. I feel like there is a smattering of opinions on imposter syndrome out there. Some people say they don't think it exists. Some people say it's not real. Some people, I think, in general, people often think that what they haven't seen firsthand or haven't experienced can't possibly exist. So, maybe in a nutshell, tell us the high level sort of idea of what imposter syndrome is, just in case anyone listening is like, I don't know what the fuck that is.
Yeah.
And then let's tackle this idea of, is it actually real?
Yeah, I love it. Well, first of all, imposter syndrome was originally called imposter phenomenon. And there was a paper that was written and published in 1978 out of Georgia State University by Dr. Pauline Clance and Dr. Suzanne Imes. I think that's how you say her last name, Imes. And they were noticing that they were working with all of these women who were highly ambitious, successful women. They were, and it was women in this particular paper. Sorry, guys, sorry, dudes. But anyway, that being said, they were discovering that these women who were really educated and they were really smart and, they had their stuff together, they were really feeling like a fraud. They had achieved all this success. Some of them even had their doctorates and they were working in highfalutin positions and they were like, I don't deserve this success. I'm a fraud. I'm waiting to be found out. And this was the common phraseology that these ladies were coming forward to Dr. Pauline and Dr. Suzanne. And so they were like, what is going on? We need to do some more research around this. And there wasn't really much around it. And so then that's how, of course, they came up with their own study around it and then came up with the term imposter phenomenon. And now we know it as imposter syndrome. I kind of like imposter phenomenon a little bit better, to be honest. It sounds a little less daunting, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What ended up happening, this is kind of an interesting twist to the story that I find really interesting. About 4 years after that paper was published, there was another lady named Valerie Young who was sitting in her doctorate program and she couldn't write her dissertation. She felt like an imposter. She was like, I'm not as smart as all these people. She had compare-itis big time. She was comparing herself to everybody else. And she overheard some people talking about this paper that Dr. Pauline and Dr. Suzanne had written on imposter phenomenon. She heard that phrase and was like, what is that? Like her mind was full on mind blown. And so she decided herself that she wanted to learn more about their research and what they were doing. And then she kind of takes their work and she really makes it, I don't want to say more profound, but for lack of a better phrase, deepens it. She deepened it over her career now. She got she finished her dissertation. She's written a book called The Secret Success of the Secret Thoughts of Successful Women. And she maps out 5 different types of imposter syndrome. So 5 archetypes. So you've got the superhero, or she sometimes says the superhuman. You've got the natural genius, you've got the expert, you've got the rugged individualist, but I've also seen this, the soloist, and you've got the perfectionist. And each of these 5 types, while they fall under the umbrella of the imposter syndrome, they have their own nuances and their own subtleties. And I love the book by Dr. Valerie Young because she gives some reframes to each of these archetypes. Like let's take the perfectionist, for example. Perfectionist, you believe that you should be fixating on problems, but what you really should be fixating on is what is working. So she gives these new competency rules to each of the archetypes. But what I believe is missing from her work, and not to judge or shame her, it's just that I'd like to deepen it myself, is actually a recovery treatment plan for each of these archetypes. And so what I've created is each of these archetypes should have their own kind of customized, personalized plan because they are different. Like, for example, the perfectionist, let's focus on what's working. So let's get you tapping around what's working. Let's do EFT around what's working. And then the soloist, I actually happen to be the soloist. I didn't know that I had imposter syndrome until I read about these archetypes and I was like, holy shit, I really am the soloist. Soloist doesn't like to ask for help because if we ask for help, we believe we're inadequate and we're incompetent. And that's what I was trained as a kid. I was told as a kid, don't ask for help. You already know the answer to that. I was denied help. So the soloist is very opposite of the perfectionist. The soloist who's always wanting to work by themselves should actually start getting into some groups and start working, like even if they're groups on Facebook, for example. So it's a very different treatment plan, if you will, than the perfectionist archetype. So that's the answer to what imposter syndrome is, and in essence, sort of how to start treating it. I believe that we should treat it by type and really have this personalized way with them. Most people, most practitioners, what I have found, they're just trying to treat all imposter syndrome archetypes the same way and give them the same roadmap, and that's not the best way to recovery for them. In answer to your question on sort of debunking the myth around imposter
Yeah.
syndrome, well, I think the only way, not only way, the ways to start debunking the myth are to talk about it more, to put it on the map, to talk more about these imposter syndrome archetypes. And then what we have the tendency as humans to do, whether we simply believe it or not, we say we don't like labels, but then we do want to be a label. It's like, oh my God, I am the soloist. Oh my God, I'm the natural genius. I fall into that category. So I think the more that we bring the archetypes to the forefront, I think that starts getting people to feel like they relate. I think the third way to get people to debunk the myth, you said it, I like how you said it's like, if we don't see it, then we don't believe it. But how many things in this universe do we know are out there? But have we ever been on Jupiter? Have we ever been on Mars?
Right.
Can we see Pluto? We know that there are other galaxies, and we say that they exist, but we haven't seen them ourselves. And we have all gone through that in our lives where it's like, oh, it takes, seeing to believing, but does it really? So I guess I would ask people to question those times in their lives when something did happen and they didn't originally believe in it. What got them to believe in it? What would they need with imposter syndrome to believe in it? It's okay if they don't have it. But I will share the big staggering statistic is 70% of the world's population has imposter syndrome.
Yeah. And that's not surprising because, and especially with the massive growth of social media, the filtered highlight reels that we are prone to seeing everywhere we look. Hello, Instagram. Not the biggest Instagram fan, if I'm super honest, because I feel like it's very fake and showy at times. And not everyone. That's, I'm sort of generalizing. I know, like, I'm not hating on anybody or anyone or anything, but there's a vibe there that if you're not kind of measuring up, you're not fitting in there. And I think that really causes people to share their highlights and hide maybe the more mucky bits of things. And that's a human tendency because conditioning, again, so bringing it back to the conditioning and what we believe is valuable, what we believe is success, what we believe we are supposed to be and do and have, and all of these things playing out in our outward appearance. So we're very, very aware maybe of what we put out into the public world to create the image, to wear the mask, to pretend we are good enough, which is a whole kind of imposter syndrome connected sort of thing, because we're constantly trying to perform. And again, conditioning and imposter syndrome are all really interconnected because we are trying to measure up. Yeah. Why are we trying to measure up? Because we've been conditioned to believe we don't have value unless we measure up and fit societal standards, fit inside the box, whatever we've been conditioned to believe is successful or good or whatever, perfect. And it's all bullshit because we're not the same. There is no standard measure. There is no one who is perfect. There is no way, and how boring would it be if there was one standard measure that we were all just doing the same thing? We'd be like robots. How boring would that be?
Exactly.
But, if we want to really make that shift and come into a space of feeling worthy and feeling good enough, which is not at all about the doing. It's simply about the feeling and the living and the being. We need to tackle those things that we've been conditioned. We need to get curious about where did this stuff come from so we can unpack it and take a good fucking close look at it. Is this serving me? Do I want to take these beliefs? They're in there probably from childhood. And experiences throughout our lives. We need to unpack it. We need to take a look. Okay, well, this is what I believed and this is where this thought came from, but that's holding me back. That's not allowing me to step forward. It's keeping me stuck in these repeating patterns of striving and hustle and perfectionism and comparisonitis, like you said, right? So I think that it's all super interconnected.
It
I would
is.
love, I would love for you to spitball on that and let me know what you're thinking as far as how does that impact our ability to manifest and our dreams, our goals, our feelings, whatever it is that we are seeking to create, and maybe even starting off with a quick definition of what manifesting is and feels like for you.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite questions and one of my favorite topics, like, and the definition of manifest can be wide and vast because there is a really big history behind it. So I'll just cut to the chase on the actual definition of it without the history. Basically, in a nutshell, manifesting is deliberately creating. If you just want two words, or deliberately consciously creating, you seeing yourself as the source and having the ability to call in and bring forth your dreams, visions, and goals. If we peel back the layers of the onion and we go a little bit deeper than that, we could look at it like, from long time ago, manifestation teachers, that all of us have two different parts of us, if you will, that we can manifest from. So we can have like earth plane goals and we have soul plane goals. And those earth plane goals maybe are a little bit more personality driven. And the soul plane goals are more about empowerment and involvement and having your soul expand and having learning lessons. That's where we're getting really deep on like the whole spiritual side. But it's okay, obviously, to manifest from both places. Where we run into a little bit of a jam or a pickle is what you were describing when we've got the imposter syndrome going on. If we are more aligned with the voice of our imposter, I like to see the imposter's voice as an energetic, since I work in energetics. And just like you described, it more than likely started in childhood. Dr. Valerie Young, who wrote The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women, says the imposter syndrome comes about because we're raised by humans and they had their own imposter syndrome. And basically, it just keeps getting passed down because it is a conditioning technique.
Yeah.
To me, I see imposter syndrome as an energetic of a collective voice of all the things that you were taught and trained and programmed that you needed to be in order to succeed and be competent and not fail. Those voice, that imposter syndrome, energetic or collective, means your mom and dad's voice, grandma and grandpa, auntie, uncle, society, religion, culture,
All of
your
it.
environment, professors, blah, 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 right? And what ends up happening is if we're not careful, we keep listening to that voice and we let that voice be the guiding voice. And generally speaking, we kind of buck up against that voice. We know internally, oh, this voice bugs the fucking shit out of me. I don't want to listen to this voice, but I'm listening to it because, oh my God, what would my mom and dad say? What would, my boyfriend say, or my grandparents, or whatever. And then, of course, that's where we feel like we become the imposter because we feel fake. And most of us are trying to manifest from that place. We're trying to, quote, deliberately create our lives to fit this mold, this energetic collective voice that we've heard all our lives that's been training and programming us. And that's where I love tapping. That's where I love EFT, because with EFT, we get really real and we're like, okay, that energy of the imposter, we're not going to wrong it. We're not going to shame it. We're not going to scrutinize it. We're going to partner with it. We're going to talk to it. And we're going to say, what's going on? What do you really, really want? And we're going to peel back all the layers of that onion and all those voices. And one by one, we're going to address them, honor them, accept them, but we're going to put them in the passenger seat now. And we're going to put you, source, you as the source, come back home to you, and you in the driver's seat, rather than it be the other way. Because most of the time the imposter's voice is in the driver's seat driving you. Yeah. And then there's all that remorse cycle that happens and all that regret that happens. So why I like to do I call it imposter syndrome recovery. This is just a phrase that I created. I like to do imposter syndrome recovery when I'm working with clients because they're all coming to me telling me, Laurie, I want to manifest my vision. I know I've got a compelling cause in me. I know I'm here for a reason. I don't know how to get there. I don't know how to make it happen because this damn imposter's voice, these limiting beliefs are so loud. I don't know how to turn them down. And so when we start tapping and visualizing and magnetizing this 3-step method that I've created to help them recover in their imposter syndrome, all of a sudden you see this other human being show up. It's an entirely different energetic. When I see them, they're radiant, they're open, they're expansive. It's like that can-do energy, and you see the life force flowing through them again. Whereas before, when you're listening to your imposter so much, you're flat, you're not engaged, you might feel numb, lots of people pleasing, lots of trauma responding, maybe walking on eggshells, really kind of not in your body. You're not embodied. And when you are manifesting from your soul, those soul playing goals, and you are like, okay, I know that this imposter syndrome exists, but I've contained it in a healthy way. Now you're really manifesting at your optimal level where you're feeling like you're living your joy, you're living your bliss, you're feeling confident, empowered, and radically transformed.
And the
I
beautiful
hope I answered your question, Christy.
Yeah. I think like the beautiful thing is that allows you to bring all of that success to yourself now, right? Those feelings, those experiences that you're seeking to create in the physical plane, you can experience all of those emotions and successes in the now, even ahead of experiencing them in the physical plane down the road. So instead of, waiting to create your happiness down the road as a result of XYZ, you'll be able to bring that happiness to right now and create it right here, right now, without that waiting.
I love how you said that, because that's a really important point. That even while you're healing and you're going through a recovery, and you might be scared and terrified to approach this imposter and try to transform this behavior, because this is behavior you've always defaulted to. This is behavior you've always known. Let's face it, you might not like it, but it feels pretty comfortable. It's like the
Familiar.
baby. Right? It's familiar. It's like the baby who's sitting in the dirty diaper, and at first it's like, ah! And it's crying. It's like, Mom, come get me. Mom's cooking in the kitchen, doesn't hear the baby crying, and the baby's sitting in its own poop. And then after, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, baby stops crying because like, okay, it's familiar. It's comfortable. I've gotten comfortable. It's the same thing. That's how we are with our imposter syndrome. But what is great, which I think is really important, that you said, even while you're going through recovery, even while you're healing stuff, even while you're overcoming stuff, it doesn't mean you're delaying happiness. You can absolutely still be happy on the way while you're sorting through this stuff, and you are shifting your focus on how you want to manifest, on what you want to deliberately create in your life. It's just that your intention and what you're wanting to call in, that now also shifts, because you're reassessing your values. You're doing it from a values place. You're doing it from a worth place. For most of the time, when we're operating from that imposter place, we're doing it from an unworthy place. We're doing it from like, I actually don't feel deserving, but I have to do this. Whereas when you're like, okay, I'm going to take the bull by the horns, and okay, I'm dealing with limiting beliefs or imposter syndrome or self-doubt, but I know it's there. I'm aware and I want to work through it. Well, okay, actually, I am consciously creating. I'm consciously creating a shift here. And that can make someone feel very elated and very euphoric and really joyful.
And I think a piece of this that could potentially be missing for some people is actually, just from my own experience, I remember back to a time where I thought those thoughts were me. Right?
Right? Oh my God, word. Yes.
I believed that the thoughts that were running through my head were a product of who I was, of my identity. And I really thought, for the most part, that what I was thinking was true. Okay. So
yes. Oh my God. Same here. Raising the hand. Yep.
So taking it back to that, none of this conversation probably didn't make any sense if that is you and you're looking at this thinking, yeah, I have all these thoughts. What of it? That's just my brain. It's doing its thing, and it's just my mind, and I'm just thinking of things, and that's who I am. I'm a thinker. I'm an overthinker. I have these different thoughts, not realizing that you are actually above those thoughts and above those emotions, and you actually have control to take a look at them as an independent observer. And this is maybe a topic for a whole other conversation, but from a conscious perspective, to look at those thoughts. And here's an example. If you've ever had a thought that comes into your mind that you're like, holy shit, where did that come from? That did not make sense. And that was not, I don't believe that at all. So I'm sure some of you have had this experience where like something's come in and you're like, whoa, where'd that come from? Nope, that is not what I believe. Just delete. We can do that with all of our thoughts. And I think that when we can shift that, become really curious about, okay, these thoughts are happening and I can see them, I'm observing them, but I'm not just accepting them. I'm questioning them because I want to know, where did this come from? And is it helping me to move forward? Or is it something that I need to flip and switch around, make a shift, get a new mindset around, or just reframe it or release it altogether? So there's a lot of things there. But I think really getting curious and really coming to grips with your consciousness as an ability to take those thoughts and emotions captive instead of allowing them to control you. This is where our ultimate power comes from, is to take back. Listen, we're all out here trying to control the things around us. Yes, because it makes us feel safe and in control. We're out there trying to manage the things. We're trying to keep things under control. It's a facade. You can't control anything that's outside of yourself. And the more you try, the more desperate you feel to get things under control, the more out of control they spin. The truth is, your control is inside of you. It's your reaction, your willingness to be aware, your willingness to get curious, to ask the questions, to see things from a new perspective that is not just what you have experienced until now, because all of those past experiences, those thoughts, those emotions are actually creating your reality, because your perception of reality is what you're perceiving as your reality comes from all of those things, all from the past, right? So any
Can
of
I add
those,
something to something
yeah,
that you're saying there?
yeah,
Because you said
absolutely,
something really, really important that I'd like to highlight, which is which kind of goes a little bit back to the other thing that you said, which was also really good, about how, if we don't see something, it doesn't exist.
right,
But we have our thoughts, right? And do
yep,
we see the thoughts? We don't see our thoughts, right? But we believe the thoughts. Well, we're not seeing them, but how can we believe them? And here's what I also want to say about the thoughts that's really important is they do go somewhere. And those lower, denser, heavier thoughts that don't get processed become emotions. And then those emotions become beliefs. And then the more that you buy into the belief and invest in it, it becomes a belief system. And if it's not an empowering, supportive belief system, but you keep defaulting to it, then it actually can physically manifest in the body, even as pain. And then, of course, behavior. It can then manifest as behavior that might end up getting you into ongoing trouble, not support you. Maybe keep getting fired from a job, or you never get started, or you keep getting in debt. You use
bad
the word
relationship patterns.
bad relationships. I was in that pattern myself. What ends up happening then is that desperation that you said. And so what manifestation, going back to the original question, was, is it's inspired action versus desperate action.
Right.
And when we're in that place of the limiting belief system, or, imposter syndrome, we're in that desperate action place. And so with this work, what's powerful about it with conscious creation is you're constantly looking at, okay, this thought that came up, how do I shift it? What emotion has it evoked in me? Where do I feel that in my body? And not wronging it, even if there is a negative, I hate to use the word negative these days.
Quote unquote.
Yeah, a lower
uncomfortable
thought, uncomfortable thought, a lack of, not a supportive thought, whatever you want to call it. What emotion did it evoke in you? And then to actually be with that emotion and work with that emotion. And then that's where tapping comes in, because we're working with that emotion and freeing it and releasing it and getting you okay with it. So that way you can shift it to a higher frequency or a higher vibration emotion. And when you're in that higher vibration emotion, that higher frequency emotion, that's when you're like a magnet. And then you start to attract. It's like when you see the person who's really smiling and beaming on the street, you don't know that person, be like, whoa, I notice you, you're super radiant, like you're full of light, I want to be around you, versus the person who's got the mean mug, resting bitch face. You're like, do you really want to go near that person?
Yeah.
Right. So it's the same thing when you are in that radiant place where you're lighter because you freed those denser emotions, then it is easier for you to attract and magnetize to you that which you seek and what you wish to manifest and call in your life.
Yeah. And there is so much.
We just went off, huh?
So good. So juicy. There's so much, people think that maybe like talking about energetics of someone is really woo woo, but nobody can say they haven't been in a room where they have felt the tension. Everyone has experienced that. Likewise, you have felt the energy of someone else who has lifted you out of a funk. So we are all energy ultimately at the end of the day. And so we can have different frequencies of energy, more positive, where we can lift others up. And that's a beautiful space to be. Or we can stay down in the muck and have an energetic pull down to the bottom. So it's not woo-woo, it's science. I'm not going into that any further right now, but I just wanted to give that example in case any of our listeners are like, oh, energy. Yeah, sure. But we have all felt it. So you may not see it, but it is there without a doubt.
And astronauts agree with you. Astronauts absolutely say we're all energy and that we are made of stardust, and doctors do too. I mean, that's what the nerve circuitry is in our body. It's electricity. It's energy.
Yeah. And it's fascinating. Like we said, full circle back to the start, but how science is catching up and proving some of these sort of like woo-woo topics are not woo-woo at all. They are in fact very scientifically based. And I love that we kind of circled back there.
Yeah, I do too.
Laurie, share with us, what are you passionately working on right now that you would like to share with the audience?
Yeah, the thing that I'm passionately working on right now is 5 separate done-for-you courses for imposter syndrome recovery. So there are 5 different recovery roadmaps. So one for the perfectionist, one for the natural genius, one for the soloist, et cetera. And they're all customized and they're all unique to each of those archetypes. And I'm hoping to have them done by the end of this month. I'm nearly done with them. So I'm super geeked to finally get them out there. And what's nice is it's pre-recorded, done for you. So you can just go at your own pace.
Awesome.
And have something that you feel is chunky and meaty, like, whoa, actually, this really did help me.
Yeah.
And didn't break the bank.
And I think that will really help people. First of all, awareness is super important. So having that awareness, being able to sort of paint the picture of where you're at right now with that honesty is what allows you to then move forward and deal with what's been blocking you. So I think having sort of an assessment tool is really useful for creating that awareness. So tell us where can our listeners find you most easily?
I think the 2 best and easiest places, Instagram. Funny enough, I like Instagram.
I'm on Instagram. I'm on it. I'm not distant. I'm still on there, but it just has a vibe, right? Like it's very much about the image. Yeah.
So Instagram, Life Coach Laurie, and my website, lifecoachlaurie.com.
Awesome. Fantastic. Okay. So I would love to wrap up with one question, and I'm going to put you in the hot seat a little bit here, Laurie.
I love it. I like being in the hot seat.
I know you do. So what is one question you wish that I had asked you about, or a topic you'd wish I'd asked you about, and how would you have answered?
I think the question that I would love for you to ask me about is a near-death experience that I had in Bali.
Oh, yeah. Well, I would love to hear about. I mean, now you've opened the door, so you're going to have to share.
Yeah, it was, let's see. So it was for my 40th birthday. I took myself to Bali and I was there for a surf retreat. And so it was like a girls' surf retreat. I didn't know any of the other gals. I think we were on our day 3. It actually was my birthday, funny enough. And so I just finished my surf and I was literally on the shore. So the water was just hitting my ankles. And suddenly there was a huge undertow that pulled me backwards and the board hit me smack dab in the front of my head. And it was kind of interesting. Like I remember really feeling how hard it hit, but I didn't think it was that hard. Like it wasn't like, oh my God, in utter pain. But it all happened so fast because then the next thing that happened was as I was being pulled backwards with the undertow, then another wave came. And so then I was completely submerged and I was quite deep, quite fast. I don't know how deep I was, to be honest. But suddenly what I recognized was I couldn't get up. Like with this, I don't know if it was really a head injury, but having been smacked so hard, I couldn't get up. And then I noticed I was passing out and it was really like black, and just a teeny tiny pinhole, I guess, of the sun. And suddenly I heard my brain say in a very different voice than my voice now, but it was my voice. Oh, this is what dying feels like. Oh, I'm dying. Oh, I'm drowning. Oh, this is what drowning feels like. Whoa, it feels really peaceful. And what was interesting was I noticed I wasn't gasping for air. I wasn't even desiring it. I wasn't freaked out. Wasn't fearful at all. And then the next thing I noticed was me feeling really serene and actually ready to go, which is interesting
Mhm.
because at that point in my life, still, which wasn't that long ago, I still had a lot of dreams that I wanted to accomplish and achieve. But I also got a little bit curious in that moment of like, oh, what awaits me on the other side? And it pretty much was like I was done. And then I guess just in this moment right then when I recognized I was willing and ready to go, it was, I guess, maybe like my soul got popped back into my body. And then all of a sudden I was like, and then I had my freak out. I guess the adrenaline kicked in, right? But what I really learned from that, gosh, there's so many things. And let me see if I could maybe kind of give my top three or something of what I learned. What I learned was we are here on this planet, and from my experience, from this near death
Sure.
experience,
Yeah.
we are here to appreciate it. We are here to appreciate the life that we are having. And that might be challenging for some people to hear, especially if they're in a really tough moment
Yeah.
right now. I can share that at that point in my life, when I was on that surf retreat, while it sounds so amazing and wonderful, I was really in a tough emotional spot at that point in my life. And so perhaps with this near death experience, I did sort of get this kind of injection, if you will, this kind of reawakening around you are here to appreciate and enjoy it, and that there are lessons and messages to take away. And the universe doesn't give you more than you can carry. So that was the first thing I took away from my near death. The second takeaway that I got was it isn't scary. So if any of you, if you've got listeners who are terrified of death, I know this sounds probably bizarre, and they're like, "This lady's a whack job," but it wasn't scary, and it was utterly peaceful and very gentle. And if you do study other people who are in hospice, actually, there's a wonderful doctor. I think his name is Dr. Chris Kern, and he's worked in hospice for a really long time, and he's been studying this in relation to like near death experiences. And his studies are fantastic. I think he's like interviewed more than 1,000 people who were in hospice, and he does believe that there is an afterlife after all of these years working with people in hospice. So I do believe that there, whether you want to call it God, all that is, universe, light, source,
Sure.
doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. But
Yeah.
that there is something waiting there for us, that our soul doesn't ever end, in my opinion, and based on this experience. And so, yeah, if anybody here is terrified of death, I would like to offer, don't be, if that's possible. I know that's not so easy. Yeah, maybe it's just two things to kind of walk away from that
Yeah.
experience. It was indeed life changing.
Yeah. And I think that gratitude is so crucial. That appreciation for what we have, even and especially during difficult times, if we can hang on to those tiny, seemingly maybe very tiny, mundane bits of gratitude and appreciation for what we have, that is one way that we can continuously cultivate happiness
Yeah,
in our life every single day.
it
So,
really is. I mean, some might say, who the hell would be grateful and appreciative over a near death experience? And I really am. I mean, it blew my mind, rocked my world. And of course, it got me to see through a different lens. And I didn't even have as graphic a near death experience as many other people who literally did cross over to the other side. That didn't happen with me. But I could feel the kind of popping out and popping in that a lot of the others who had a deeper NDE than I did. But that gratitude piece is huge. Even to be grateful for the tough experiences and see them as master teachers. Like, what is it that they're really showing us?
yeah.
And that is one of the biggest things I gained from that experience. Yeah.
And that helps us to really shift some of the more challenging experiences in life when we can see them as an opportunity for growth and learning and expansion. That really allows the maybe it softens the blow of the struggle, because we ultimately can see at the end of the day it is all taking us forward on this journey of life.
It's so true. I always say obstacles are opportunities in disguise. They really are. And Yeah. I love how you said that, how you worded that. It's really true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like a perfect place to wrap up. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for being on the show. I've loved every part of this conversation. It has been absolutely amazing. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Christine. It's been fun. I've had
Yeah.
such a fun time. So thank
I'm
you for
glad.
having me.
Yay.
Yeah. And thank you to your listeners also. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much for listening to today's show. I trust you were inspired to take back your power and create your happy. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share the show with women in your life who could use a little extra inspiration today. If you'd like to connect with myself and or today's guest, you can find those details in the show notes. We would love to hear from you. If you've got an inspiring story to share, you can also apply to be a guest on the show at createyourhappy.ca. As always, get out there, have fun, be you, and create your happy.